So here I was having the best sex of my life, theoretically, and I wasn't able to orgasm. So they literally showed me a vibrator and said, go try that in the other office. And I, turned 50 shades of pink. I went and I tried it. I'm like, oh my God, like, where have you been all my life?
The idea that you're supposed to stop being sexual at a certain age, how do you help women combat that very collective narrative?
Well, I'm a living, breathing example of someone who's 61 and sexually active and enjoying it.
Is there a too old for sex?
Just have to modify, even I have back and hip and neck. Like,
I know so many guys that get really intimidated when you bring anything electric into the room. Like, I'm not good enough.
And that feel that if you try anal play, that means they're gay.
Like, if a woman's doing the thing, like, that's not gay.
They're missing out.
Karen, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to learn from you. I guess we can start with what brought you to the Sexual Health Conference here in Denver and a little bit of how you got into your work.
Yes, definitely. So I started out, I'm actually just certified as a SHA, Sexual Health Alliance sex educator. I also certified about a year ago as a menopause coach and launched a podcast. And so I'm putting that all together here at the conference. And my journey really started when I got divorced and kind of had my sexual awakening a little over 10 years ago. And in the process, as my hormones were changing, I learned afterwards, I started to suffer, if you will, from anorgasmia, which is the inability to have an orgasm. So here I was having the best sex of my life, theoretically, and I wasn't able to orgasm. And so that journey began my understanding of sexuality and my ability to really talk about it. I ultimately ended up at a practice they pair you with a nurse practitioner and a sex therapist, and I learned that I was deficient at the time in testosterone because your hormones start to change in midlife, and also learned about vibrators. Mm-hmm. So they literally showed me a vibrator and said, go try that in the other office, and I, turned 50 shades of pink and red, and I went and I tried it. I'm like, oh my God, like, where have you been all my life? I'd never tried a vibrator. So in my early 50s, I started to learn about that. So just from a personal level, having a better sex life, but also from a conversational level, being able to talk about it, because every time I went into the office, they'd be asking me all these personal questions, and it just became easier and easier to talk about. And I was like, I got to get everybody talking about this stuff. And so that's sort of where the journey began, but it didn't really culminate into anything. I didn't know what it was until around my 60th birthday. I was like, I think this is what I want to do. Finally found my passion. And then I launched the podcast and went my path from there.
Amazing. So do you think that it's like really common for a lot of women to experience vibrators like that, like later in life, that they're not into? You said you were 50 when you first did
something like that.
Yeah,
I was divorced, so I hadn't used one with my ex-husband.
Did you ever use one by yourself before then? No. So do you think that that's probably common, or like a lack of exploration, or I guess expecting that you're supposed to have pleasure?
Oh, absolutely. I certainly think in my generation, I can't speak for everybody's bedroom, but I can say that there's a lot more shame about talking about it in my generation than there is when I talk to younger people about it. And I'll say, someone will say something about their sex life, and I'll go, well, are you masturbating? And the younger women will say, yeah, of course, or I have a vibrator, and the other people, women and men will be like kind of ashamed of it. So I do think that the learning about your body, learning about sex, we certainly weren't taught it. I now have met up, certainly here, and physicians and gynecologists more and more, hopefully, are getting educated and educating their patients and saying, take a look down there. Let's see what's going on. What does it really look like, and how is it changing, and how can you enjoy it better?
And at what age would you recommend that women start to get hormones checked and get into the importance of knowing your hormone levels?
So I'm going to debunk the myth of hormone levels to the extent I'm not a licensed medical practitioner, but the best way to deal with issues with menopause and hormonal changes is to treat the symptoms. That's what a good doctor will do. There's really no accurate measurement of your hormones because they fluctuate so much. So you could be, in your middle or late 30s and start to feel symptoms like hot flashes or brain fog, or even in your early 40s is more typical. and the doctor will start to, hopefully, you'll start to associate it with the changes of hormones. Oftentimes what happens is these symptoms are so disparate and you're younger and there's not a connection between that and menopause. So I encourage younger women to get more educated, because the more you know, the more you can tie these things together, which was not originally what happened with me. Remind me your question. Your question was what, hormone levels,
yeah,
right?
Hormone levels,
right.
Yeah.
So what you want to look out for as a younger woman is, are these things happening that don't make sense? And are doctors either poo-pooing me or treating me with antidepressants, which is like the number one thing, or sending me, for me, I had heart palpitations and they sent me for a full cardiac workup. And I later learned that that was a symptom of perimenopause. Now, I actually had a very progressive doctor who put me on hormone therapy in my late 40s, but most women were not as lucky as me. Mm-hmm. And so when you start to, there are things that are obvious that we hear about with hormone changes, like hot flashes, night sweats, insomnia, but then there are things like frozen shoulder, dry skin, mm-hmm. Itchy ears, like things that you're like, where are these things coming from? Brain fog, sudden mood changes. And what happens is they start getting treated as separate things, when really they're probably, a hormone therapy as a starting point might be a good treatment. Now, there's other treatments as well, but my go-to would be start looking into hormone therapy.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's a shame that so many people still kind of discount it a lot. I know so many people, myself included, that I've dabbled with hormones, and it made such a big difference in like my mood, my skin, libido, all of the things. And for me, like, I have a lot of thyroid stuff, and then that my testosterone naturally occurring is nil, like
wow.
Nothing. So it has helped me a ton. But you still see people in the medical community that are like, they'll look at my doctor and be like, you're just selling snake oil. And he's like, men have been doing this for so long, and we've been lying to women about the application, and they need to know that this is for them too. It's not just for men. Like, you wonder why men age so well, like fine wine. They have all of this abundant testosterone, and if not, then they're supplementing it. So we can do the same thing for women. When do you see like a typical change or dip in sexual function for women?
Again, it really depends. Mm-hmm. Some women will say they were not symptomatic at all, and a dip in sexual function is personal. Mm-hmm. What does sexual function mean to you? For me, it was an issue. I didn't have a problem with getting aroused or libido, but I had a problem with orgasm. For some women, it's that the physical, painful sex as a result of the hormonal changes that cause vaginal dryness or other issues that they may have. There could be the emotional changes in your the brain changes that are starting you, like you're so depressed and feeling so shitty and you're not sleeping well, and so it's like I don't want to have sex anymore, and you think and that's the reason. So it's really a range.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So when you start noticing these changes, blood panel, see where everything's at, so you can kind of story tell. But getting, I guess, more comfortable with your changing body and the idea that you're supposed to stop being sexual at a certain age, how do you help women combat that very collective narrative?
Well, I'm a living, breathing example of someone who's 61 and sexually active and enjoying it. I always say enjoy it safely, but I think that it's a myth to say that we no longer are sexual. There's now a couple of studies. Lisa Mosconi's brain research talks about how women that she interviewed, one of the things she found in particular with women who were postmenopausal, they have this sort of I don't give a fuck attitude. Cosmo and the Kinsey Institute did a study and found that women over 60 were having the best sex of their lives. So I think we have to start to, when we see that there are women that are aging that are sexual beings. I mean, we have some beautiful celebrities that are sexual, and also I think the couples who've been together for a long time sort of say, okay, like we had our sex life, we're done now. Mm-hmm. And there's so much opportunity to rebuild and start a new kind of sex life or new intimacy life. And it doesn't mean, introducing a third person or an affair, if you will. It could, but there's so many things that we just sort of write off, like, oh, my sex life is done. And your sexual health is part of your overall health, and it's so important. It's important for blood flow, for cardiovascular health, for muscle health, for bone health. There's so many reasons why you need to have sex be part of your repertoire of overall health. And so I would just encourage anybody, it doesn't matter, even it can happen with a hormonal changes of having a child as well. So all these things are possible. And I just want to make a quick distinction. You were talking about thyroid issues. I know with my gynecologist was checking my thyroid from when I was young as well. So I think that one of the distinctions that's starting to be made now, and there's a great book by a new one called The New Menopause by Marie Claver, something like that. She talks about, now we call it menopause hormone therapy, because what you have is hormone therapy for treating thyroid. It also happens to help you as you age with those changes, but hormone therapy is often referred to, hormone replacement therapy is often referred to as what we're doing for menopause.
So how has your sex life changed from when you were in your 20s, 30s, compared to now?
Well, I was married. I got married in my mid-20s, so I definitely didn't have that ability. I hadn't sowed my wild oats, if you will. So we were, my ex and I had some sex, but towards the end it was a lot less, and it was sort of what is one of our speakers talking about, the Sunday morning whatever he called it, missionary position kind of sex. It really wasn't terribly experimental. And also, I think the thing that has changed most for me, aside from getting a little louder and more emotional in how I experience intimacy, is being able to talk about it. It's very hard when you get out. I'm single, and we get out into the dating world after being married for a really long time. I was married for 25 years, to ask for like STI testing. And I've gotten very comfortable with, you want to get naked with me, that's a requirement. And then also being able to express, like, I like it this way, I like it that way. I mean, even as a sex educator and someone who speaks about it on as a vocation, it's still hard. But being able to say, this is what I want, this is what I need, this is what brings me pleasure. How can I do the same for you? And how can we have this enjoyable experience together? That's something that I'm so much better at doing. And if I meet a man who isn't interested in having that conversation, then I realize he's just not for me. And that's what I need. That's not what everybody needs. Yeah,
communication is key. Is there a too old for sex?
Absolutely not. We should be having sex. I have two stories. One is that there's an assisted living community, I think it's in Orlando, that has the highest rates of STIs transmissions in the country, because all these old people are having sex. So good for them. Let's just get them to be doing it safely. And the other story was, I was at the hair salon, and my hairdresser was telling me a story about this older couple that he had that were in their 70s. They were celebrating like their 50th wedding anniversary. And he asked the wife, I guess he cut both their hair, what did you get your husband for your anniversary? And she said knee pads, and he couldn't figure out what she was talking about. But it was related to it's you just have to modify, even I have back and hip and neck, like you just got to learn to modify, and you have to also learn to say, like, this is the way I have to do it, but I really want to do it, so like let's figure this out, let's make it fun.
One of the speakers, I think he was saying, or no, maybe it was Kamna, and she's like, you might not be able to do reverse cowgirl, so
that's right,
your hips might allow for
exactly.
it, but you just pivot.
Exactly.
So for couples that have maybe fallen into the trap that they have had sex, that it's past their season, and they have closed that door for a very long time. Let's say it's been years or even decades since they've had sex, because that was the narrative that they gave themselves.
Right.
Do you have any tips or suggestions for how they can go about opening that door back up?
I think it has to start with wanting it at some visceral level. But I also a lot of interviews that I listen to, it's an opportunity, like you're listening to this podcast and you hear this conversation. Okay, honey, like, what do you think? We haven't had sex in a really long time. Could we start this conversation again? And I used to say, like, when my ex-boyfriend and I, whenever we were having conversations about sex, it was in the car. So we were not looking at each other. It was a lot easier. So if the conversation is difficult to start, you can have it in a way that maybe you're not looking at each other, or you're turned to the back, say, oh my God, I heard this podcast, or I read this book, or I heard a speaker. And even if your partner does not want to talk about it, you've now put something in their head. And the conversation may grow from there. And you don't need to start with going to a dungeon. Like that does not have to be the next step. It could be something really simple, as buying a vibrator, or, trying to do it in a different room than you used to do it, or putting a candle and just getting romantic and forgetting about, the purpose of like getting naked. And one of my sex therapists that I had interviewed, she was talking about having an evening of not sex. Just saying, okay, let's just be together and lie in bed together and just remember what that felt like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think it's probably one of many symptoms in a relationship that just kind of seems to fizzle out. So yes, sex is one of them, but it might also be just like the cuddling or the hand holding or just those little touch points throughout the day. And then all of a sudden they're all gone.
Yep.
And I don't know that would be enough for me. Like it's hard because you can see these relationships, and I see these relationships where everything else is so great, but they don't have that intimate love or that intimate connection. And for them, they think that's okay. And I'm like, I wonder if you're just like convincing yourself, because to me, I don't know how that relationship is different than any other relationship then. You know what I mean?
So I would ask you, is that relationship really so great, or is that just the facade that they're putting on?
Yeah.
Right? And even, if you want to make it simpler, I combined two different words that I heard in two different podcasts, and I call it now sexual snacking. Like, what about, it doesn't, the holding hands again, or the pat on the butt, or the touch behind the back, or the like coming home from work and giving the Gottman kiss, which is a 6-second kiss or a 20-second hug. Just doing some little gesture. It's just like any habit you want to change. Like if you try to do the whole thing, say, okay, we're going to go, Saturday night, we're going to have a wild night of sex. It's probably not going to happen if you haven't done it in 20 years or 10 years or whatever. But if you say, okay, how about we hold hands tonight on our way home from dinner, and then try that, and how about we have a long kiss and start just rediscovering each other. And either you're going to rediscover each other and it will spark, as Esther Perel says, like a whole new marriage in the same relationship, or you'll discover that maybe it's time to find a new relationship.
So how did you know that you were ready for a divorce? If you want to share, you could skip it if you're not.
No. I kind of have an NDA, but I'll just say in general that we just grew apart. We were together from when we were very young, and things just changed, and we were different people. So
it's a big leap. So are you allowed to say how old you were when you?
Oh yeah. I just not in the details. Sorry. Ask me the question.
How old you were when you got divorced?
We separated in 2013, so I think I was 50 or 51 and divorced 2 years later.
So that sounds really terrifying to a lot of people. And I think that there's this narrative, especially if you're anything over 25, that you somehow lose like your market value. And then if you're leaving something that people are saying, well, this is a sure thing. You've got this sturdy, reliable marriage over here, and you are unhappy, you're selfish, you want more, and you're going to leave this thing and be single, and like, what if you don't find anyone else? What if, like, there's like all of these what ifs and a lot of fear and anxiety that comes with it. So I think that traps a lot of women, especially if they've been in the marriage for a very long time, or if they perceive themselves as being older or whatever that is. So then they would rather be in like this lackluster, passionless, loveless marriage because of the security that it provides, versus like taking that explorative step of saying, well, like, let's just go see what's out there, and if I can be happier, even if I end up by myself.
I think a couple of things you've addressed. I would say the biggest barrier to divorce for women is financial.
Okay.
So I think that's a really hard thing. And depending on what the relationship is like, if it's a very high conflict divorce, I used to work in divorce, so I saw a lot of it. If it's a very high conflict divorce, it can be very devastating for a family. So I think there's a fear of that. I think if you have the means to be able to do it, it's just a question of finding the confidence. I mean, I had many years of therapy of kind of finding my voice, and that was one of my issues as a child. Not being heard, not being seen, not feeling safe, and I finally was able to get the confidence to say, like, I need to explore me and be me. And kudos to my ex. We have a decent relationship. Like, he was okay staying in a relationship that was less than ideal, but I wasn't. And so I think once you get sort of a taste of what it's like to be independent, and it's not easy. I mean, I'm 61, I'm single. I don't want to be alone for the rest of my life. I never have moments of regret that I got divorced, but I do have moments of fear that what if I'm alone for the rest of my life and it's not something I want. And so I work on trying to find other ways to fulfill my life. And I'm on those dating apps, and I'm very intentional, and I'm now a little more discriminating, and I've learned a lot about myself over these last 10 years that have helped me grow as a person, and have helped me try to find partners that are more appropriate for me and that are in the right place as well. Like, you attract where you are, and it's a choice. I mean, do you want to live, we're living a long life. Do you want to live a long life in an unhappy situation and just tolerate it and enjoy what you can outside of that? Or do you want to see if maybe there is something? And I think it takes a lot of courage to be able to do it, and not every person has it. And I respect those people who stay in those relationships. I guess I was it wasn't easy, but I got there over many years, and I've like I said, no regrets. I mean, I'm so blessed and lucky and grateful, and I'm grateful for him and for the marriage. And I look at every relationship I have had since then as a learning. A lot of people feel like divorce is failure. I do not think of my divorce as a failure. I think it was meant to be what it was. We were both young. We were compatible at the time. We changed, or maybe he didn't change and I changed, but whatever it was, we were different, very different people. And now I get to do other things and get to meet other people and get to explore other parts of me and other types of people. And when they don't work out, it's still sad. But at least it's like, okay, what did I learn from this experience, and what can I take from it to enhance my life moving forward?
So dating, what is that like? Do you have any advice for anyone that is also on the apps, and how to, I guess, like, set yourself up for success on these dates? And then I'll let you answer that before I ask the second question.
So I'm going to start with saying, like, what is your definition of success? For some, people, I think your expectations should be, this is my should. I'm looking to meet new people and make new friendships. If you go into get on any app or in any relationship with, I am looking for my soulmate, this person is we're going to be compatible on every single level. He's going to be evolved. I'm going to be evolved. His kids are going to be perfect. Everything is that's just not realistic. So I would say, approach it with honesty and integrity, because I believe how you show up is what you attract. Be discriminating, but also be open-minded. And I've never been, I've been out there. I've kissed a lot of frogs, as they say, and I've had a lot of, interesting relationships that just didn't work out. But I have never gotten to the point where it's like all men suck, and I hate the dating apps. Like, I believe in it. I believe in love. I know that a person, several people, whatever it's going to be in the rest of my life is out there, and I think that's the attitude we should have. That being said, I do know, and I've heard this from women too, a lot of people just get on the apps to get the likes, but they're not really serious. And I think that's the part that makes it hard for people like us who are serious. But
interesting.
Yeah.
So when you're dating and you're kind of vetting each other out and seeing how you work with each other, do you find that it's difficult for a lot of men to be open to these conversations around sexuality and pleasure? I sometimes struggle talking about it, which is so crazy given my past, but I feel like I also feed off of whoever I'm talking with. But I think for men specifically, talking about what do you like? This is what I like. These are my expectations for the relationship. Do you find that lack of vulnerability is common with men, or is that selection helping with that?
It depends. In the last year, I've had some interesting experiences, and my life coach says, and if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. But I never trust that. I'm like, no, maybe it's a maybe. But she's been right every single time. And what I found for me, I clearly, probably like you, we can talk with anybody about anything, but we still have our fears and whatever. So I've been finding that the men that I tend to connect better with, once I tell them what I do, because I don't tell them on the apps, especially because it's dealing with sex. There are people out there that believe just because you talk about sex, you must have this crazy wild sex life. I actually had one guy, question, you haven't done this and you haven't done this. And I'm like, no, I know about it. I talk about it. It's not my practice, and I respect it. But so I think that if you can't talk to me about what I do right up front, then we're probably not going to connect, because sex is a very vulnerable thing to talk about. And so I hope that, the people that I connect with have some emotional maturity, which, that's a hard thing to do, especially for men, sadly. That is who I will connect with. And, I've heard, sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised too. But I do know, like, if I tell someone what I do and they change the subject very quickly, that they probably have an issue talking about it, and it's probably not going to work.
So I guess getting back to some of the changes that happen physiologically for women, what was it that you found that helped you with the not being able to achieve orgasm?
So it was a few things. One was that I was low in testosterone, and they also put me on I forget what kind of antidepressant it is, but it's the one that gives you dopamine, and so that combination helped. And then I didn't understand that you needed clitoral stimulation. So this is a clitoris. So we all should know that most women cannot orgasm from penetrative sex alone. And when they started asking me about it, they're like, do you need clitoral stimulation? It didn't occur to me until I started to really think about how I used to have intercourse. And yes, the clitoral stimulation was important. And so once I got that straight, I'm like, okay, now we know how this works and how important this is, and bring in the vibrators and put that all together, and now it's all working really well. But I also, one of the journey, part of this journey of becoming a sex educator, what I've learned a lot is my definition of sex has really changed, and that's actually one of the questions I always ask on my podcast is, what is your definition of sex? And I found Chris Donahue's definition so interesting, because sex, the way we always thought about it was we're doing this foreplay so that we can get into the bedroom, so that we can have penetrative sex, so that he can ejaculate, and maybe I'll have an orgasm. Where now, just the whole experience of being with somebody has become the erotic experience, the sensual experience, the sexual experience. That is part of it. And so whatever the issues are, they become less important. I mean, a lot of men, what is the statistics? 40% of men at 40 in their 40s will have ED, erectile dysfunction, 50 in their 50s, et cetera. So men will start to have issues too. And you just want to open up how you have sex to expand the definition. And sometimes it's just kissing. Sometimes it's, it's just taking a shower together. Sometimes it's mutual masturbation. It doesn't have to be the thing. And maybe there's other ways to do it. And so once you kind of explore different ideas, then whatever the limitations are, they're just there.
Do you have any advice, or have you worked with a lot of women that feel guilty if they use any kind of clitoral stimulation, especially if they need a toy? Or have you heard a lot of negative feedback from men with that too? Because I know so many guys that get really intimidated when you bring anything electric into the room. They're like, I'm not good enough, or what's wrong with you that you need this, or that you need this right now. And it seems to be this competitive relationship that they have with toys, or even if you're touching yourself, because they don't understand that 90% of women need that. So it's not like you're not good enough. It's just, it's how the mechanics work, my friend.
Right. It's very interesting that you're asking me that question, because I hear that a lot from younger women. I find the older men and women, we all know things aren't working. And so I was, the first time I was telling someone, so there are a couple things physically, I'm on hormone therapy. I have an estrogen patch that you wear between your vulva and your belly button. So I'm when you get there, you're going to find a sticker. So that's the first thing that I was ashamed to say. And then I'm and by the way, I need a vibrator. And I have not had a single man say really? It's let me try it, So I think because they know that there's going to be challenges in their ability as well, that I guess as you age, being single, and maybe it's the men that I've been choosing that are just a little more open-minded. So yeah, and I think that's changing too, because I speak to a lot of very young women who are all they're all into sex toys and bringing different things, and so I hope it's changing.
Yeah, maybe I'm running into the wrong guys then, because a lot of them they take personal offense to it. And then I guess bringing it up before you get into the situation is probably helpful too, so that you're not like taking them aback if like they didn't have time to process that it's going to be so like you were like, I have a patch, I'm going to use a toy, right? So like maybe getting that out of the way in the beginning. If I know some women that cannot achieve orgasm without a toy, it's just, and they're younger too, it's just they have other stuff going on, and they just like need that little force multiplier, if you will.
Right.
And so it's non-negotiable for those women. So it would make sense to just bring that up beforehand so that everyone can kind of like go through their process and go through their feelings. Like, this is what we're doing together. It's going to be a great time.
Or it can just be one of those things like, you know, you kind of titillating, like I got something that I'm going to bring into the bedroom, and this could be kind of fun for us. I mean, there's all sorts of, there's like the toys where like one partner can control it, and, you know, the other partner can be wearing it. I mean, there's so many fun things that you can do with it that I think it's eye-opening too. It's like, oh wow, like I didn't know these things. Like, you know, I have one partner that is all into it's just discovered like anal plugs, and it's like he's all over them, and I'm like, you go boy, like, you know, like go for it, like if that's what works for you. That's an interesting thing that I discovered is, and I guess I'd never really explored that much, but men that feel that if you try anal play, that means they're gay.
I know a lot of guys that believe that. Probably 90% of them.
They're missing out.
Like, being gay, it matters who's doing the thing. Like, if a woman's doing the thing, like, that's not gay. Because it's a woman doing the thing.
And one of the things that I've learned in this program is that just because a man has sex with a man does not make him gay either.
I don't know if I agree with that one. Yeah, that one I don't know if I agree with. I think if you do that and then you're like, oh, that was awful, I didn't like it, then that would be the caveat. But I think if you did it and you like it, like, that falls under that umbrella to me. Okay. That's how I would define it. Yeah. Yeah, that one I'm like, same sex, like traditionally that is how we have always defined that word.
But when we, I don't know, you may feel differently, but when two women have sex, but you traditionally have been with a man, would you consider them gay?
It depends on why they're having the sex. I think a lot of women have sex with other women performatively. And they do it for like the arousal of like a male partner, and then there are women that do it because of their pure attraction to a woman. So I think intent would have to factor in. Men don't do that. Men don't like perform for women in that way sexually, because like most, it's just not it's not something I think we've been evolved for. Like men perform through like direction, conquering, building, protecting. Like these are things that like women have always valued. Women haven't traditionally valued sex appeal from men, which is why you can see like you'll usually see more of like a discrepancy, I think, with dating, where like the man doesn't necessarily need to be good looking, but he'll have all of these other factors that like feminine people traditionally value. Right. And they're like, why is she with him? And you know, he's probably got all of these other things that like tick, 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 tick. Right. But men value beauty. So, and men value sexuality. So I think that's why a lot of women tend to like make out at bars after a couple of drinks, because they know it's going to get a rise out of the guys. Like you don't see men doing that for women because it's not rewarded. If it was rewarded, they'd probably do it. So if you saw like a huge shift in the culture and in like biological drivers, and all of a sudden women were like just drooling over two guys, then you know they'd probably be doing that for sure. And then we would probably change that definition of being with a man is not gay anymore because the intent.
Very interesting. Okay, I love.
Alternative take.
Yeah, no, because I always had the take that you had, and then I just felt like what I've learned in this program has kind of opened my mind to that's not always the case. Like, what if I just tried it and I was a man? But I hear you.
So let's talk about your podcast. How long have you been doing it?
I started it about a year ago, September. It's called Taboo to Truth, Unapologetic Conversations About Sexuality in Midlife. And I started it to start talking about my own journey. I literally recorded it on my phone, and I said to my girlfriend, what do you think? And she's like, just do it, you know, and I press a button. And then it evolved into more. So I talk about, you know, what's happened with me physically, my journey. I talk about my dating situation. I interview sex therapists and couples who have opened their marriage, and I'm trying to remember, I've talked about hormone therapy. I've interviewed a bunch of doctors who are specializing in midlife sexual dysfunction. I've got kink coaches, or you know, sex coaches and counselors, and all kinds of people. And it's just the general theme is midlife sexuality, but it's been kind of broad, and people are really receptive. I find like there's not a lot of people talking about the intersection of sex and midlife because, like you said in the very beginning, there's a lot of people that just feel like, well, why would I
I've
even
done
talk
that.
about it? You know, so I think it's just been so much fun, and it's so interesting, and people are so receptive. And what's most amazing for me is that the last business I had, I did some stuff in between, but I was a divorce coach, and people like will tell you their worst stories, but to like, you didn't get receptivity amongst the attorneys and the therapists, and to really like help embrace and make a better experience, if you will, or less bad experience for someone going through divorce. But in this world, everybody, you know, no matter how famous you are, or how well known you are, or how experienced you are, the fact that I am not, like, has had no impact. It's like, I'm so glad at the end of every interview, it's like, I'm so glad you're doing this because it's so needed. And so I feel, you know, I found my purpose, but my purpose is bigger than me. It's really what, you know, what we need as we need to be talking about this. We need to be talking about our changes. You know, the menopause conversation's getting a bit louder, which is great. And now we need to parlay it into the sex conversation, because we're all having sex, hopefully, or we were, and we should be having more of it. And it's just part of life, and there's nothing to be ashamed about.
So last question.
Okay.
Do you find that people tend to get kinkier or more explorative as they get older?
I think it depends. I think I know that swinging tends to be more common. Younger people who've gone to swinging parties have told me that the population swings older, pardon the pun. So I think I hope they do. I hope people get more explorative, because that's what keeps it alive. And it doesn't mean you need to participate. You can just go to a sex club and watch. You don't have to go in there and start, you know, having sex with somebody. You can go to a dungeon and watch whatever floats your boat, or you can try new things. You can dip your toe just like anything else and just try it. I think it's a great opportunity to really, you know, explore and, you know, start a new chapter.
Yeah, what I see is it tends to swing older as well. And one of my friends is very involved in all of those alternative spaces, and she does cruises and all, like, you name it, she does it. And all of these things are naked and swinging and open and all of that. And she says every year there's this one 85-year-old lady, and she's just there hanging out, just having the time of her life, her and her husband, and they're not necessarily involved in anything, but they just like to be around it and like see it and have that energy from other people. So I'm like, yeah, maybe when I'm 80, I just won't need this. She's like, Candice, I wouldn't be so sure. At the places I'm going, it's all ages, and there is no expiration date. So I think, yeah, the work is great. People need to remember that we don't cease to exist after menopause or after a certain age, and that you're still valuable. Your sexuality is valuable. So thank you very much. And before we wrap up, do you want to give the listeners and the viewers all of your socials, where they can follow you and how they can support you?
Yeah. So the podcast is Taboo to Truth, Unapologetic Conversations of Sexuality, Midlife, and it's on any podcast platform that you may listen to. I also have the YouTube channel at Taboo to Truth, an Instagram handle at Taboo to Truth, and a website, taboototruth.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.